Welcome to the LZGranderson Show. Today is Friday, June 27th, and I am your host, LZGranderson. And here are the three things I am looking forward to today. Number one, my conversation with Jorge Sedano. Number two, my conversation with Jorge Sedano. And number three, my conversation with Jorge Sedano. George is my buddy of mine, very good friends. We used to co-host ESPN LA radio together for years. He is now host of ESPN LA's Sedano and Cap. But more importantly for this conversation, he is also ESPN's regular sideline reporter. You may have caught him during the NBA coverage in Oklahoma City versus the Pacers. He also does ESPN radio. He does tons of podcasts, and I'm really, really excited that he took time out to do this podcast right after the season. So this is me and my boy, Jorge Sedano. Sedano.
What's up?
I'm so happy to see you. How are you doing, man? Do you even know what time zone you're in now after the NBA
I definitely
season?
know. Yeah, I definitely know what time zone I'm in now. Although it was funny, while I was doing the finals, you kind of forget, like, okay, OKC is in the central, Indiana's in the east, and then like people are texting you about like, hey, can you do this thing at this time? And I'm like, what time zone are you asking me to do that in? I have no idea. You know how many times I double booked something by accident because I'm a moron? Like, oh my God, it happens so many times.
You're not a moron, man. It's hard. It's hard keeping up. And especially, like, I want a president that's going to get rid of mountain time. Like, I'm good with all the other times, but it just seems like the mountain time people just are in there to fuck with you. Like, it doesn't seem like they're in there to really be productive. They just want to screw up meetings.
Well, think about it. Mountain time is strange. And look, I love my people in Denver, but it's like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like, right. Like football. Wait a second. So you're telling me the NFL starts at 11 a.m.? Like, what kind of weird time is that? You know?
What is that? Or at least rebrand it. You know, like mountain time doesn't sound sexy, but if you call it like brunch time, I want to travel in the brunch time zone. Like that sounds sexy, but mountain time's like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Denver, so I guess we should just get right into it. Is Joker staying? Because everyone else seems to be for sale.
No, he's staying. He's staying. I thought it was kind of a strange thing to just lob out there. Like, I guess the question was thrown out based on what happened to Halliburton. Right. And Tatum, right, where you have to kind of create this gap here. But here's the thing, like Indiana and Boston aren't trading Tatum and Halliburton. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I just didn't understand it. And I feel like Josh Kroenke's really buttoned up. So it just felt like a very strange thing for anyone to say, but him specifically, because he's usually so well-versed.
But you know, the thing though is that after Luka, and I don't know if that's going to be a new thing or not, like AL after Luka, but after Luka gets traded, it just seems like everybody is just kind of like, if you don't have a no trade clause that's buttoned up in your contract, with only a couple of guys do at this point, then like you should be wondering whether or not people are talking behind your back about trading you.
Well, here's what I'll say, and you know this, billionaires love to make money, okay? And they hate to lose it, okay? So they look at this thing as an investment now. It's less and less in regards to where you have these ownership groups that are 1,000. And I'm not talking about Denver specifically now. I'm using like Dallas as the example, right? Yeah. So Dallas's ownership group, they're casino people. So it's very black and white. Like, this is what the spreadsheet says. This is what this should cost. This is what the value of this should be. And they look at it as, in Luka's case, Nico was, it seems now it's no secret that for a couple years he was complaining about his conditioning and things of that nature. So if you're these casino people, right, and you're like, well, wait, we are very black and white in what we do. There's no gray area in these situations, especially when it comes to high-priced items, right? And in this case, Luka's a high-priced employee. And they're probably looking at him like, well, wait, you're complaining about him all the time, and he's only 25 years old, and you want us to give him $350 million for 5 more years, in 2 more years, by the way, because it's not even right now. So, wait, why would we give him all that money if you seem to think that he's only going to be in worse shape moving forward? So that's where you're at. So a lot of these owners are thinking that way. It's a lot more cost conscious. And here's the other thing, LZ. The common fan doesn't realize that when they recreated this collective bargaining agreement, not to get too far into the weeds in the NBA, they have these aprons. They call it first apron, second apron.
Yep.
First apron is basically the old school luxury tax for the most part, okay? Where the only penalty is you're paying money, right? You go over that first apron, you pay a luxury tax type of fee.
Everyone does it.
Right. And everybody does it, right. But that second apron, then all of a sudden, this is what they did for the smaller markets to stay more competitive. Because if you go over the second apron, it's not just the money, it's your roster construction. You can't aggregate salaries in trades, which means you can't use two guys to trade for one in a scenario like that. You can't use the buyout situation in March. Okay, so you can't add players at the buyout deadline on March 1st. And you can't also use the exception money because I mean the NBA has this weird deal, unlike the NFL, which just has a hard cap, where like, yeah, you could use your money up to this point, but we'll give you a little extra that you can use if you're only at this point, at this level of the luxury tax. But you can't use those things either. So all the tricks to get around the roster construction are all gone. So these owners and GMs are like talking to each other saying, not only are you going to pay a boatload of cash, a ton of cash, because you're going over these thresholds, right? They call them aprons. But then we can't even build the roster the way we want to build it either once we get over that second threshold.
Well, let's get into the roster construction, right? We talked about, Denver, obviously, just because it was floated out there, the possibility of, not even the possibility, just the idea of trading Joker based upon the dynamic of the current offseason. But then you talked about Dallas, and Dallas is intriguing because, one, they just drafted a number 1 pick in the draft, right? They got Cooper, right? We knew there's no shock there. But I think now becomes a question of what do you do next? Because for me, George, I look at it and I go, had they traded the pick for someone who was ready to go, like a Giannis, I'm penciling in Dallas finals, maybe championship, not even blinking. I'm not doing that because you picked an outstanding rookie who we don't even know is outstanding yet. And so when you look at the roster as it stands right now, do you pencil them in or ink them in as an NBA champion? And if not, what are they missing?
I don't know if I put them in as an NBA champion yet. I would put them in the contenders category, right? Like here are the tiers I look at in the Western Conference right now. Clearly OKC is in the top tier, right?
Right.
Then after that, I actually feel like, are there other teams in that same category? Maybe Houston is in that category now, because they really clearly just needed somebody to help them close games. And even Kevin Durant at 37 years old can certainly still do that. So maybe Houston's in the next category, just below OKC. I put Minnesota there. They've been to the conference finals 2 years in a row, right? Denver, because Jokic is still Jokic, right? Like he's getting all the Infinity Stones still when he plays against you. Like he's collecting them.
Right.
And then after that, then there's like another group to me, like a third tier. And that third tier is like the Lakers, the Warriors, and Dallas fits in there potentially as long as Kyrie comes back in a reasonable amount of time. So that's a pretty big caveat that I would say, because Kyrie right now is scheduled to come back late January, early February, basically before the All-Star break. But who are they going to have to run the show before Kyrie gets back? Like, to me, that's a big key. But the rest of the roster is pretty nice. Like, it's still very much a lot of the guys that went to the finals with them 2 years ago, plus AD.
Big exception of Luka.
Right. I got you. But
in terms of why you made it to the finals, I'm going to put Luka at 1A, 1B, and 1C.
No, I got you. But I do think Cooper Flagg is the real deal in this sense. Like, he's coming in at 6'9", and he's going to play defense right away. Offensively, I think he's skilled. There'll be things he needs to work on because the physicality is different. The defenses, the schematics will be different. People will be able to figure it out a little bit. He'll have some ebbs and flows to the season, but he's got all the skill. Don't get me wrong. But the one thing he definitely has that I think will translate from the beginning is defense. Like he's a very good defender at 6'9". So I think that will put him in a different category than most rookies because he's got an offensive skill set, which can wane, as I just mentioned a second ago, because, again, like, it's a rookie. Guys can figure you out a little bit, and you're going to have to go to some secondary stuff.
And he's going to get tired.
No doubt. No doubt. But he's got AD. He's got Kyrie eventually. He's got a group of guys for the most part in Derek Lively and Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, those guys that have been to a finals. So LeBron said it best, I thought, with Steve Nash on the Mind the Game podcast, which is, unlike him when he came to the league, he's got some real vets and like a team that has real aspirations that he's joined. So he's already a step ahead of the game at this point.
He don't even have real vets. He got vets that actually want him on a team. Remember some of the quotes Bron had facing him? He all right, but don't think he's going to come in here and do anything to change our fortunes. Right. It's like, damn. Yeah. So if you find yourself looking at the Dallas roster and saying they could be anywhere between possibly contender to in that third apron, where are you putting the Lakers? Because I'm wearing a Lakers t-shirt right now, and if you don't say the right things, this podcast is over.
I put them in that next group, I told you. So if OKC is in a group of their own, I think Houston, Minnesota, Denver probably in that second tier. And then that third tier of contenders in the West is, Golden State, the Lakers, and Dallas, right? Like, I think that those teams, to me, are in that conversation.
And that's based on how they finished this past season, George? Or is this based upon what you think they're going to look like heading to next season? It's a little bit of both,
I would say.
Okay.
It's a little bit of both because the Lakers obviously had a disappointing end to the season. The Warriors, they lost because of Steph's injury. And I am projecting clearly with Dallas a little bit. And I also don't know what the hell the Lakers are going to look like beyond LeBron, Luka, and Austin Reaves yet. They got Hachimura. They got 5 guys they can trust. Now, do I trust that they'll be able to get a center or 2? Because really you need 2. Yes. But what kind of caliber of players will those guys be?
Why do you trust it now? Question. Let's get into it for a second. Why do you trust it now? Because it seems to me that we've been talking about a need for a center basically since Dwight left. And that was like 3 years ago or something like that, 3 or 4 seasons ago. So why are you so confident now that they'll be able to fill this hole when for like basically 4 years we've been saying, get a center, get a center?
Well, the difference is Rob Pelinka actually said they need a center, whereas in previous years they said, no, AD is going to play center. You know what I mean? So I think that in itself leads me to believe that they're pretty adamant about getting someone like that. And Luka, historically, if you look at him, he needs a vertical spacer.
He needs a vertical. Yes, he does.
So I think he had 2 of them with Dallas in Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. So in a perfect world, you're hopefully you're drafting one of those tonight on here because we're taping this on Friday on the second night, leading into the second night of the draft. I think you need to sign 2 of them in free agency, or wait, you should sign one in free agency, probably like a veteran guy towards the minimum in the back end of his career, but you need to trade for one for sure. I think a combination of trade, draft, and free agent signing needs to be accomplished. So that way you have 3 guys on the roster, and 2 of those guys, in theory, are going to actually play.
Is Austin Reaves a Laker next year? Because I really hope so.
Is. Yeah, I think he is, and here's why. He just turned down, smartly, by the way, turned down the extension that the Lakers offered him, because if he just waits 1 more year and bets on himself, he can make way more money in an extension. He can be, instead of like, I think the extension was going to be like 4 for like 84 or something like that the Lakers could offer him now, but he can get like 30 a year if he just waits 1 more season and goes into free agency. So yeah, I think honestly that's when, if you're the Lakers, it's also beneficial to you, because if he's making 30, then down the road obviously, then he is someone you can trade to get more, extract more value for, because right now he's making $12.5 million. And
great bargain.
You're not going to be able to get a good enough player at $12.5 million unless you're aggregating another salary, but then you're weakening your depth. So it's counterproductive. So him being traded this year doesn't make any sense. Now, once he signs that free agent money, then I think all bets are off for Austin as a Laker.
Here's a question. What would you trade him for, right? So, like, if the idea is to construct a roster where you can have, some guys you can depend on, some guys who can initiate the offensive need, be it knock down some threes, hustle off. Like, I'm describing Austin Reaves. So what exactly are we trading him for when this is the kind of guy that every team would want on their team?
Right, except he doesn't defend the same way that you would want him to defend.
I mean, he tries. Come on, Joe, he tries. I see him really try hard, especially when he wears the headband. He's into it.
I'll say this. My biggest question mark about the Lakers roster construction beyond the center part of it is we live in a world where you're only as good in the playoffs as your weakest link defensively. And the Lakers actually have two guys in the backcourt that don't defend at a high level. So unless you're going to have these all-world guys in the back line that can cover up for you, I find it hard to believe that moving forward, once Austin is making good money, that you would keep him because it just doesn't make sense in regards to how you want to play defense or how you need to play defense in the NBA moving forward. So I think that a lot of it will depend on, is LeBron on the roster, right? So if LeBron is not on the roster, they probably need a wing, right? So you would probably try to trade him for a wing. If LeBron is on the roster somehow still at 42 years old and still playing well, then maybe if you haven't acquired...
LeBron hasn't even gotten to the he all right level yet. He's still considered among the top 10 players in the NBA based upon the all-NBA finish that he just had. Yeah. So, I'm waiting for him to be just an all-star.
Right.
level.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe LeBron's going to be Tom Brady of the NBA, you know what I mean, and play to the past 45. I mean, who the hell knows? But let's just say LeBron is on the roster for argument's sake, then at that point, you probably need to look at your big man rotation again, because, again, we just talked about you're going to trade for a guy. You're probably adding a late veteran type guy, and you're drafting a guy in the second round. The late veteran guy that you're signing via free agency most likely is not going to be on the roster more than likely moving forward at that point. The guy you drafted the second round, the chances of a second rounder being on the roster are not great either. So you're going to right. So I think you're still going to need another big body at that point, and that's what you would do. But you would want to trade him for someone who's got some versatility to him up front, is what I would say.
Man, that's a tall task for Pelinka to kind of pull through in one off season. If he doesn't pull this off,
well, this is two off seasons we're talking about, because remember, Austin won't be a free agent until after next off season.
But I'm looking at it from the perspective of the Lakers are now, no longer the Buss family's team.
Right.
And that relationships are different. And that I know just from personal experience, every single time ownership changes, people want to bring in their own stuff. So from my perspective, he has a year to make sure that however they finish in the postseason, they can't be in the first round. And the complaints on the back end can't be they need to get bigger. So, to me, that's a lot to ask for him to be able to accomplish in 1 year.
He's threading a needle. I'm with you on that. And especially with very limited assets this offseason in 2025. He's got one first rounder to work with. Austin doesn't make enough money to actually fetch you anything of real value. So that's why they're trying to tinker on the margins, where there's this story out there about, Rui Hachimura and Gabe Vincent for Andrew Wiggins or whatever. They're trying to figure out the margins while trying to figure out the center position on the fly.
I think Dwight Howard's free. Not sure if he's doing anything.
Dwight Howard is getting into fights in the big three. Dwight Howard's done, okay?
How do you know Dwight Howard's done? All we got to do is dust him off and give him some, some oil in the knees. And
No more. No more Dwight, man. Dwight's done. Dwight could barely move that last year he was there.
So since we're talking about last year, let's talk about this year and heading into the Vegas camp and obviously the offseason, and more moves are going to be anticipating. When you think about the needs of all the teams that are in the NBA, who's in dire need of a successful offseason the most?
Man,
I have an idea.
Well, beyond the Lakers, you're saying?
Right? No, beyond the Lakers.
Right.
Yeah.
Who is desperate for a successful? I mean, listen, if you're Milwaukee, you need to figure something out. You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want Giannis to walk, right? He's your whole franchise. So I would put Milwaukee in that category of desperation. I would say Cleveland is in a weird spot. You've been the 1 seed.
Really?
Yeah, you're the 1 seed. You got to figure some stuff out. I think in the East in general, there's a lot of those teams.
What do you think they need?
I mean, I think they need, well, first of all, they need Evan Mobley to become their best player, but you can't like fast forward that. You know what I'm saying? Like, and he's getting there, he's getting close, but that's their real chance of winning a championship is him being, because he's defensively, we know he's great. He's the defensive player of the year, and he's been that since he came into the league, but his offense has been rounding out little by little. They need him to take one more leap, I think, and then they're like for real a contender. But yeah, I think they got to figure out the fringes around him too, beyond him and Donovan. But Milwaukee for me is number one with a bullet, because if Milwaukee loses Giannis and Giannis wants out, then that's who everybody wants.
I think they're actually in a good position, because if Giannis wants out, then they can do what Dallas didn't do, which is actually shop him and get the best actual, deal for him.
Right. But here's the problem with Milwaukee, is that they don't control their draft for the next 5 years. So they need,
shout out to you, Portland.
Right. They're going to need actual players too. Like, it's not just give me all the draft picks. It's going to be, I need real players, because I got to remain competitive, because I don't have any of my picks. So tanking is pointless. So it's a weird spot Milwaukee's in. That's why I think they're near the top of that list.
I can definitely see that. For me, it's the Clippers. It's the Clippers, because you had SGA, man. You had that guy, and you gave him up for a guy who hadn't proved himself at any stop prior to that, which, not necessarily his fault, but that was on his resume. And then I remember he literally got the keys to the city, and it was like Paul George Day in Oklahoma City, and then it was like, boom, now I'm gone.
Well, the interesting thing, like in retrospect, okay, I mean, it's I'm with you. Look, and Doc Rivers will tell you 100 times over. I've probably heard it 1,000 times about how he tried to convince Kawhi that SGA was going to be a stud and this, that, and the other. And Sam Cassell also in that conversation as well when he was with Doc there with the Clippers. But what I'll tell you is this. Paul George that year was finished third in the MVP voting. Like, it's not like Paul George. And this was third in the MVP voting after coming off a catastrophic injury and looked great. And at the end of the day, that's what Kawhi wanted. So, if you're the Clippers, you never get the Kawhi Leonards of the world, and he wants Paul George, you appease him. Like, I don't think anybody does anything differently there. Look, it's no different than LeBron wanted AD. It worked out. They won the championship. But by the way, how many times have we sat there either after that championship and been like, oh man, poor AD's hurt again. You know what I'm saying? So they did, some of this is luck too. I don't think there's any question about it.
Well, I think all of it is luck, to be honest with you. I think luck is the aspect of any conversation in terms of all-time sports greats that doesn't get enough credit, because luck is what allowed OKC to do what it just did.
Right.
I really thought Halliburton was on his way to a monster game.
Right.
He was feeling good. He was smiling. 9 points in 7 minutes. Like, I don't know if they would have won it on the road for sure, but it certainly wouldn't have been as comfortable.
Right. I agree with that. I think we get the same result, but I think we get like an epic Game 7.
Get an epic Game 7, but luck, right? Bad luck. Right. I think about Michael Jordan's first championship. A lot of people don't talk about. He lost one game against the Lakers. That was the one game their leading scorer was healthy. Right. James Worthy gets hurt. He can't play the rest of the series. Michael Jordan wins 4 straight, and everyone's like going, Michael Jordan's so great. And it's like going, but the Lakers lost their leading scorer. Right. Like, why aren't we talking about that? Right. So I think luck is as important to a person's resume as anything else, especially in sports.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, luck changes a lot of different fates. I think that, if you look at, if you want to stick to basketball, look at those Lakers-Pistons series, right? The year Isaiah turns his ankle, right? And still fights through that. Maybe the Pistons win in '88. You know what I mean? And
no, we do. We definitely do. Yeah.
So
I was pretty confident.
Yeah. So that happens all the time, like in sports. It just luck is a huge part of it. I'm with you. So yeah, it just with the Clippers. I'm starting to believe the curse is real, dog. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, me, like, I'm Latino. A lot of my people believe in curses. I was kind of like anti in that sense. Like, I'm counterculture in that sense. But I'm starting to believe this one's real, bro, because they got so many things that have gone wrong for them that it's hard to believe otherwise.
Do we need to come up with a theme song? Like instead of we don't talk about Bruno, we don't talk about Ballmer or something? Like do we need
I don't know, man. I feel and Steve is so great. Like he's
a wonderful man, a wonderful owner.
Right, you couldn't ask for a better owner than that guy. Like if you own the sport, if you were a fan of a sports team, like it's just crazy.
I felt so bad for them, towards the end of this postseason. And I'm a Pistons fan. I grew up in Detroit and I'm a Lakers fan. So that's my duality. And so when I laugh at the Clippers, it's coming from a genuine place of I don't like them. But I felt so bad for them, man. I was just like I was like, damn, SGA is going to win a chip. Paul George is in Philly. It's just like everything that was supposed to have been great in 2020 when you came in here with all that energy, just.
Yeah. And by the way, the Paul George thing actually worked out for them, like in the sense that they didn't, I mean, he was hurt again this year. So that in that regard, they were good. But I knew it. Like when I saw them, I thought they were going to beat Denver in the first round because I actually picked them in 7 because I felt like they were deeper. They had played the
Cardinals on that team.
Dude, the Aaron Gordon shot. That you want to talk about luck? Like luck that has never happened in the history of the NBA. Okay, the NBA has been around a long ass time. Okay, and we've never seen a dude catch a ball and dunk it at the buzzer. Like we've seen that in movies. We have never actually seen that in real life. Okay. And when that happened, I'm like, oh hell, this series is over. And people are like, it's 2-2. What are you talking about? I'm like, no, this is now over. You can't go from literally a millisecond of being up 3-1 against that team and then be now 2-2. And like, that's over. It's not going to happen. They're not going to win that series anymore. That is some of the worst luck I've ever seen in my life.
And it's so funny because there are so many games like that when you start talking about GOATs, all-time great teams, we just forget about. And it's just bad luck. Like, you're right. Like they beat Denver if they're up 3-1.
Listen, if you want to go baseball, the Derek Jeter dynasty doesn't even happen if some kid doesn't reach over the fence against the Baltimore Orioles and catches the ball. You know what I'm saying? Like that entire Yankees dynasty of the late 90s and early 2000s could look completely different if that kid gets called for fan interference like he should have been.
So here's a question for you, because we are in this analytics age, right? But we just ran off about the importance of luck. That's my beef with analytics, that it takes that aspect of it out, right? It just drains it. It makes it so that every single aspect of what you watch in a basketball game has been studied and has been analyzed. And so the execution is more robotic as opposed to organic, where luck can come in and just screw everything up all the time.
Yeah, look, I get what you're saying, and I get that pushback. But what I would also say is, analytics has evolved in a way where, and again, it's just such a loaded word. It's really just information. If we just called it information, it wouldn't be as threatening to people.
It would not be as threatening. You are right. You are right. And if people shot less 3-pointers, if both those things happen, it would not be as threatening.
Right. But here's the thing, like analytics has evolved beyond just shooting threes or whatever, or offense. It's evolved to defense. It's like, it's basically like film study too. Like there's a lot of analytics involved in film study, which is, hey, and I'm using this as a random example. I don't know if this is actually the case, but like Jason Tatum likes to take 3 dribbles to his right, 1 crossover to his left before he does his step back, right? Like, and it's that stuff where you, and he likes to do it from this area of the floor. This is where he makes that move, right? That's analytics too. It's just not a numbers thing per se, but it is analytics because it's information. So analytics has evolved to a place where I think it's beyond just the obvious math part of it. I mean, math is always going to be at the center of it, but I think it involves even just technique and strategy and things of that nature. But yeah, crazy stuff happens. But the point of analytics and information and strategy and studying is you're hoping that you can minimize the variance of luck by being as prepared as humanly possible.
I know, but I like the luck. I want the luck. Give me the Kawhi jump shot that's bouncing 19 times before it goes through the hoop.
That was crazy.
That was crazy. I want that luck. I don't want I guess I'm being whiny about it because I'm Gen X and
it still happens. It still happens. You still have luck.
it just feels less, there's less serendipity, I guess, that's involved. It just feels so, even like the luck feels like it's been programmed already.
By the way, terrible movie that I still like to watch occasionally if it pops up on if I'm flipping, I still flip my guide on my DirecTV. But if the John Cusack, Jeremy Piven Serendipity movie comes on, I'm a sucker for a rom-com. I may stop for a few minutes.
Number one rom-com of yours.
Oh, When Harry Met Sally. It's not even close.
God, Jesus Christ. Are you serious? When Harry Met Sally?
For sure. It's literally like started the genre. What are we talking about here?
What do you mean it started the genre? The Bible started the genre. That's the first rom-com. A snake comes up and say, hey, girl, don't do that. And she's like, oh, what you talking about? I'm going to go ahead and eat it anyway. That's the first rom-com. It just had a real dark ending. That's all.
Yeah, When Harry Met Sally. I don't know. I'm a sucker for a good rom-com. When Harry Met Sally, again, I mentioned Serendipity. Anything with our boy Freddie Prinze Jr. from back in the day, I'm in on that,
I'm going to go with Boomerang, man. That is still my number one rom-com.
Great rom-com. I would agree. I mean, listen, Eddie did not have a lot of rom-coms, but he did that one right. The whole thing with the toes.
I was just going to say the toe thing, man. Yeah. Like, I felt that in my soul. He was like, you know what, man? Everything else might be a joke, but I think that's real for him.
Lady Eloise and Strange, you know what I'm saying? Come on.
I think that the rom-com genre needs to make a comeback, because I don't know if you've been paying attention to like a lot of the studies.
There is no rom-com anymore. It's all just like it's all cartoons and superheroes.
Right, but like, is it because we are no longer a romantic species? Like, why?
Gen Z apparently doesn't love romance the way we love romance. So there is that, allegedly. I don't know. I'm not.
Well, I mean, it's on an app, right? So I mean,
it's easy, is what it is now, right? Like, maybe that's what they should do. They should just do a rom-com with the app. You know what I'm saying? And like, just kind of do that.
Is there an NBA app for guys who are looking just for a drop off?
I'm pretty sure there's like one of those apps. I don't know what it's called, but it's like one of them is for like basically you have to like apply to be on it because you got to be so rich to be.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about. I only know because I've heard rich people talk about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not in my wheelhouse. Going back to the NBA, and leaving When Harry Met Sally behind. Okay. When you think about not just the offseason in terms of the draft and what we're going to see in terms of, pickups, in terms of free agency and signings and all of that, I'm thinking about the NBA from an economic perspective, and I'm seeing these contracts go up and up and up. And I'm looking at the news stories about how viewership is going down and down and down. And we saw what happened from a business perspective in terms of what with TNT and the shifting of where the games are being broadcast. And so I guess my question is, how concerned are you from, a business person? Because I know you think along these lines as well, that there's a tipping point in terms of the salaries that you're seeing happening in the NBA, where guys are making, you talk about Austin Reaves making 30 and he may not be able to guard anybody. That means he wants to win a guarding one, you got to pay 40 or 50.
Yeah. I think it's going to be fascinating to see. I think what's going to happen is, the previous CBA, I thought, squeezed out the middle class of the NBA player is what I would say. And I think that,
How so?
Well, in the sense of like, the max guys were getting their max and there wasn't a lot left over because the pie was smaller. Now the pie is bigger because of the money. Remember, they get whatever it is, 51%, the players of the pie. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, and that's allocated towards salaries. So I think because of that, what I think you're going to get in this new collective bargaining agreement is, as we alluded to earlier, right? That second apron is in essence a hard cap. Okay. And these owners put that in there because they need to protect themselves from themselves. And that's what transpired previously. We started getting maxes, LZ, that weren't maxes, okay? We've been down that road for almost a decade now, where there's a bunch of dudes getting max money, and you're like, wait, that guy's a max player?
Exactly. Right. And so I'm sitting here and I'm going, there's going to be a moment when the pendulum swings back, right? It's kind of like he's seen the film.
Right, that's where this is going to happen. because this is going to be, in essence, a hard cap, we're going to see what I like to call the NFLization of the NBA, where you're not going to be able to afford to pay anyone. And it's what we already started talking about, right? You're going to see teams move off of stars. You're going to see teams try to fill those voids with guys with lesser contracts, with multiple players as opposed to one, right? In the NFL, the draft is incredibly important because you need cost-controlled contracts, right? I think that in the NBA, the draft is going to become more important because you need cost-controlled contracts based off what we've already described, right? I actually think it's going to bring the middle class back a little bit in NBA salaries because teams are going to be like, well, you know what? And I'm just going to use this guy as an example. And I feel like this poor guy is going to get sideswiped here for no reason. But they're going to look at a guy like, who's a max guy right now that shouldn't be a max? That's probably not a max player. Let's go old school. Like Porzingis at one point was a max player, right? Like they're going to look at Porzingis and say, well, he's not a max type player, so he needs to be in that $30 million range as opposed to the $70 or $60 million range, right? So I think that that's how you're going to look at it now. They're in essence, I think the owners are going to be smarter about this because they have to be, because they don't want to go over the second apron, the hard cap. So they're going to have to create a new salary structure, and guys are going to be pissed. Okay, guys who are used to making that close to max money or max money, who are going to all of a sudden make 60% of what they're used to making. Like they're going to be pretty upset about that stuff. But it's because teams are going to have to make hard decisions, and because teams are going to have to be better at scouting, development, and all that stuff. Whether that's the draft, the G League, or here's another thing. And this is what Indy did with Halliburton. This is what Oklahoma City did with SGA, is teams are going to start identifying guys on rookie scale contracts who have underwhelmed for some reason, underachieved, not been put in the right position to succeed, or maybe injured even, right? Any of those categories. And they're going to try to identify guys and say, that guy, may not have worked in Sacramento, but it'll work with us, like the way we want to play. So I think that teams are going to have to be more shrewd. So I think salaries will then be commiserate and fall into multiple different categories based off all those things I discussed. But all of it is because the owners needed to protect themselves from themselves because they were just handing out max contracts like they were candy.
I felt like they didn't trust each other. I felt like they were just, like it was like this weird thing. Like I would never forget when Rashard Lewis came out with his first big contract that blew the bank and everyone. And I just kept thinking, and it's not like he wasn't a good player, but it just felt like the money they were giving him was for made guys, not potential guys. And to your point, I think one of the things that's going to be beneficiary for the league is that the money is getting more and more reserved for made guys, and the up and coming guys and the guys that haven't proven themselves, they can no longer get over under the cover of a very generous sort of CBA for everyone. Right.
It basically became a point where, like, if you drafted a guy, let's just say, right, like you drafted a guy and then, his 4 or 5 years came up and his extension eligible. The first extension is usually not the big issue, right? That one is like commiserate to like 25% of the cap. So you're like, all right, whatever. Like if you believe in the guy and you drafted him and you feel like he's a cornerstone, you're like, all right, 25% of the cap, he's one of the pillars of the team. But once you get to that 30 and 35% area, which is where you get on the next couple of extensions, then all of a sudden you're talking about that guy, the 35 especially, that's more than a third of your salary cap. So now you really have to make really smart decisions. And what happened was a bunch of dudes were getting that 35% that were not the guy. Right. And you should be
not the guy, but like to me, I don't mean to cut you off, but not only were you not the guy, sometimes you were the problem. Because usually you're on the defensive side, and that's usually where people, that was the issue. Like you couldn't guard anybody, so we had to, cover for you.
So I think that what's going to happen is, because again, you have those three scales of maxes, 25, 30, and 35%. I think teams, maybe you can get away with, like the 135 guy, right? And then like 130 or 25. Like, you're going to have to pick. You know what I'm saying? Like, unless you're just like Sam Presti and you're so good at drafting and you've got like everybody's picks for the next decade, maybe you could have all three, I'm sure, because you have so much wiggle room to create those cost controlled contracts because you've got so many picks and you're so good at drafting guys. Like, maybe OKC can be the outlier and have a 35, a 30, and a 25% guy on their particular roster, but that's going to be the outlier, I would say. It's got to be you're going to have a 35% guy like your Shea, and then after that you're going to have like one of those other two guys, and you're going to have to deal with the other one. Like, if you've got like OKC may down the road have to figure out, okay, we're willing to pay the tax and do all this stuff up to a certain amount of years with our three young guys, right? Shea is the oldest guy at 26, so he's at that 35. But I'm talking about J-Dub and Chet, right? Because they're going to be up very similarly at the same time. So they'll get to that 25%. So they'll be 35, 25, 25. So that's 85% of the cap already.
For three guys.
For three guys, right? So after that, they've got a little wiggle room for like a year or two, but then they're going to have to make a hard decision on either J-Dub or Chet, in theory, you would think.
Sounds like the idea that they're going to have a dynasty, as tempting as we are to say that based upon their talent and their youth, is going to get undermined by the simple economics of basketball.
Yes, I think they've got about a 5-year window is what I would say, LZ. And that's about what you're going to get in this new collective bargaining agreement. There's no longer going to be the San Antonio Spurs of a 15-year dynasty where they won, 5 championships. I just don't think you can keep. Well, maybe they were different because remember, as those guys got older, they actually took a lot of team-friendly deals.
Well, so, they also had a lot of luck.
They did, for sure.
Kicked off with the Tim Duncan,
right. Yeah. But what I'm saying is, as those guys got older, like Timmy took less money, Manu took less money, Parker took less money. Like, that's actually what it would take. So I should correct myself. So to have that San Antonio Spurs run where you draft a Kawhi, you get lucky with a Kawhi Leonard, and you have those three types of guys, you got to make sure that those guys also are willing to be team friendly. I'll give Kyrie a lot of credit. He gave the Mavs a discount. I was kind of surprised that he did 3 for 119. Granted, he's coming off a catastrophic injury in his early 30s, but I mean, we've seen a lot of guys come back from that now. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like.
I also got to think that he just has so much else going on financially. He's got a lot of investments in a lot of successful companies. I wrote a piece about the investment he made with Beyond Meat a few years ago in the LA Times. And, that company continues to just goes up and up and up. So, maybe he's just thinking, I don't need to get all my coins in this one place.
For sure. And what I would also add is he's got having been around him a lot last year when they made their run to the finals, he's also in a different headspace, and good for him. Because as we both know, there was a time he was very radioactive is the way I would describe it. And he became the leader of that team in a way that was not a plot twist I would have expected. Okay. But I give him a ton of credit for figuring things out. I give him a ton of credit also for understanding this is a good place for me for a number of different reasons, right? He's tight with J. Kidd. Remember, he grew up idolizing J. Kidd. He's a New Jersey kid when J. Kidd was going to the finals.
Oh, when he made his runs. Yeah, that's right.
And then Nico and him go back to when he was a teenager at Nike. So like there is a level of trust, I think, there as well that also aids that process.
It's going to be so awesome to see what happens in Dallas, man. I know I'm a Lakers fan, I'm a Pistons fan, you're a Heat fan, but between the trade we know Luka in the midseason and the number 1 pick, I can't help but want to go into the season and just look at Dallas the entire time. Who are you looking at? Besides our teams I just mentioned, which team intrigues you the most?
Which team intrigues me the most? So if I had to, I want to see what the hell Boston does. Like, in the sense of like this gap year thing. Like, are they actually going to trade Jaylen Brown next? Like, to me, that's the thing. What does San Antonio do? They have 3 point guards now on their roster, right? So they traded for Fox. They've got Stephon Castle, who's the rookie of the year, and they just drafted Dylan Harper, Ron Harper's kid. Wemby, to me, as we all know, is a generational talent, right? Like, they need a wing in the worst way possible. Are they going to try to convince Giannis? Like, is Giannis going to end up there? What ends up happening in San Antonio with Wemby to me is near the top, along with what the hell is Boston going to do? Because Boston, to me, this gap year is a fascinating experiment too. And then I already mentioned Giannis. So, but yeah, those are some of the teams that I'm genuinely curious to see beyond the teams that we've already discussed. Oh, and KD. Like, is KD the missing piece in Houston?
I think Houston took a step back.
Really?
Not because they got KD, but because of what it took to get him. I think they're going to miss.
I don't think. Oh no, I disagree, LZ. Jalen Green. They've been trying to trade him for a year.
No. I'm not talking about him from perspective of talent or perspective of what he has to offer a team. I just think from a youth perspective, like, you can't make that up. You can't make up being 20-some years old and just flying all around the court. Right. And as talented as KD is at 37, he's not going to give you that. Bron doesn't give you that anymore. You can't replace that kind of youth. And that youth is what helped OKC. Just having guys willing to fly all the way around the court everywhere. And I just think you lost 2 young guys who would do that for you in exchange for one guy who won't do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like KD still played pretty good defense when I watched him in Phoenix last year. And look, I don't think that of course, he's going to be 37 years old. I don't think he can just like fly by guys the way he used to. But he's still got all that incredible skill. His pull-up jumper is still as nice as it gets.
Offense. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about defense, not offense.
I thought he played pretty well those 2 years in Phoenix defensively. And he's going to have a better defensive unit around him this time than he did there. So, again, those are the teams I'm watching for sure. I'm genuinely curious. But the Wemby thing is fascinating because I'll tell you this. A lot of the rumors in San Antonio, and, you were there for a while, he wants to win now. He ain't trying to wait, you know what I'm saying, and build this thing. He wants to win sooner rather than later.
Well, a lot of that has to do with him. If he wants to win now, he has to get stronger. Right. He has to learn how to be more aggressive. I think there are moments, I've watched several games from him in San Antonio when I lived down there, and I just thought there were too many moments where I just didn't know you were on the court. And for you to be that big, that's not a good sign. So I need to see him be more aggressive, consistently. I think that would help a lot because sometimes it feels as if the guys who were waiting for him to take control of the offense, particularly when he wouldn't, the wrong guys were taking the shots for the Spurs. The wrong guys were being aggressive. And so I think if he wants them to win now, George, it starts with his mentality being, you know what? If I got the rock, no one can stop me. That has to be the mentality to me.
Yeah, and I think that'll be there. I feel like he was on his way last year before the blood clot to being more of that player compared to where he was his rookie season. I think his rookie season, there was some obviously incredible highlights, right, to it. Yeah. But I think it was that. I think his body, I think will change over time. By the way, I don't think he's the exact caliber of player, but I think he's at least, in the same stratosphere is Chet. Chet defensively was incredibly impactful in these finals. It was offensively where I felt like, you could see his body get run down a little bit, right? He was getting pushed around a little bit. So I think those types of guys with those body types are certainly going to have to put on a level of muscle and dedication to that part of their game,
Last question for you before you wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I get it first.
Right.
Who's winning the championship?
Like next year?
Well, not this year. I got the answer to this year, George. Yes, next year.
Damn, I don't know, man. There's still a lot of stuff going on. I mean, look,
I know. That's why I want to get you on the record now. Yeah, based on this date right now, if you had to put your money on one team that's going to win a championship, is OKC going to repeat? What does your gut tell you?
Okay, I was going to say, it's so hard to repeat now, but if there's going to be a team that's going to run off a few in this era because they're just so well constructed, because now as a young team, and this, young teams, LZ, they don't understand the pecking order, right? And that team understood the assignment. They understood the pecking order. They knew Shea eats first, then J-Dub and Chet eat, and then everybody else eats. And by the way, just because Shea eats first doesn't mean everybody else ain't going to eat. You know what I mean? Right. And so they were wise beyond their years, and I felt like they were constantly learning on the job. But now that they know what it takes to win the 16, okay, I think that they're incredibly dangerous. So I would say I would pick, if you ask me right now, not knowing what the hell else everybody's going to look like, I'm going to say OKC repeats.
All right. That sounds good to me. It's a safe pick.
It is a safe pick because they also got, again, we're not even talking about like the fact that Lou Dort and Alex Caruso are all NBA defenders, right? They got a kid in Cason Wallace in year 2 that is going to be an all NBA defender. They got a bunch of pit bulls out there playing defense, man. They are crazy. When they start getting in you and picking you up full court, I haven't seen a team play defense like that since like when LeBron and Wade and Bosh were all in their 20s still when they got together, and they were just turning people over constantly and getting on the fast break. Like, they've got some of that to them in that regard.
Yeah, man. That's why I say what I said about Houston. You know, Dylan Brooks might be a knucklehead on offense, but defensively, he flies around and he's making things, uncomfortable for people. Yeah. And Green, again, his length and his athleticism just makes things uncomfortable. So that's why I said I feel like they took a step back, but we'll see.
I like Jabari, though. Keep an eye on Jabari Smith Jr. I like him. I think he's going to be a good player for them. Agreed.
Jorge Sedano, my buddy, my friend, thank you so much. And congratulations, man, on another fantastic season of NBA coverage. As always, impeccable.
Love you, brother. Be good. I love the sign, by the way, in the back on the brick. It looks very nice.
Oh, I just realized that bitch was crooked. Tucker, you didn't even tell me, dog. You got me all crooked in this episode, man. Where you at? Oh, man.
Tucker, man, come on. You gotta make sure my man looks good back there. LZ, love you, brother. Be good.
Love you too, brother. Thank you.